Hi, Chris. Thanks for your invitation.
I'm thrilled to have you here for this featured Trailblazer interview and to congratulate you. You have got a paper that's being published in Frontiers in Veterinarian Science. It's so exciting. Can you tell us what this paper's about in plain language and what problem were you trying to solve?
We tried to solve the problem that there is no single systemic process been described for patterns that I've seen for years and years, and that many horse owners and professionals also recognize. And across different disciplines and types of horses, there are repeatedly the same or similar constellations of problems and bodies that seem less and less able to organize themselves efficiently under load. And these presentations are often given different diagnoses or diagnostic labels, but in practice, they frequently appear together. So the problem we are trying to address is a conceptual gap, and we have many descriptions of individual symptoms, but no coherent framework that explains how these patterns belong together at the level of the whole organism. And in the paper, we propose the PSF framework, which is progressive structural and functional change, to describe the patterns of progressive reorganization processes within the body. And these processes can move in two directions. There's one trajectory that involves a maladaptive, self amplifying reorganization of movement patterns that progressively reduces structural and functional capacity. And the other trajectory describes a self stabilizing process of physiological recovery and improving functional organization. So the goal of the paper is essentially to provide a systemic lens that helps to make sense of patterns many people are already observing in practice.
And I've read the abstract and talked to you a little bit about it. It's very exciting, and I personally think and hope that is a framework that people will adopt and apply to their work, whether they're working with horses or people or maybe other animals. So let's move on. And so, what patterns were you seeing in the horses in the first place that led you to develop this framework?
There were not so much individual diagnoses, but the direction in which the whole system seemed to reorganize. And across many different horses, I kept seeing a similar shift in the overall organization of the body, and movement became less coordinated and less stable. The horse relied more on compensations, and the body seemed to lose the ability to distribute load efficiently through the whole structure. And so instead of a balanced, adaptable system, the horses gradually moved toward a state where they more and more compensated, and parts of the body started carrying loads they were not really designed to handle.
Hmm.
And what fascinated me was that this shift often followed a recognizable and predictable trajectory over time. It was not random, and there seemed to be a progressive change in the way the system organized itself.
Yeah, nice. It reminds me also of some of the things that I've learned and seen through Mariana Barrato and Leonid Bloom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so why is the PSF framework needed?
Mm. One reason is that the way problems in horses are usually approached is highly fragmented. So we
Mhm.
have many diagnostic labels and many specialized interventions, but they often focus on isolated symptoms rather than on the organization of the whole system. And One uncomfortable realization that came out of this work was that some of the strategies widely used to solve problems may actually contribute to the cycle that produces them.
That's a biggie, eh?
Ah. And when interventions focus on stabilizing local symptoms rather than restoring the system's overall organization, they can unintentionally reinforce the negative trajectory. And the PSF framework helps to step back and recognize these processes as systemic patterns of structural and functional reorganization rather than isolated problems.
Do you think or hope that the PSF framework will be adapted to humans? And what do you think that might look like?
Potentially, yes, because the framework is built on biotensegrity as the structural organization principle of the body.
Mhm.
And the structure doesn't prescribe a single function, but defines the space of possible solutions.
Yeah.
And that basic structural logic is the same in horses and humans. And for that reason, it can sometimes be misleading to focus too strongly on individuality and individual pathologies and problems, because these individual differences certainly exist, but the underlying structure already defines the range of organizational states the system can occupy. And if similar structural principles apply in humans, it would make sense to ask similar questions. How does the organization of the system change over time, and what conditions allow it to move forward, move toward more functional patterns?
Yeah, can I highlight that and just read it again for our listeners? And that is, it makes sense to ask similar questions. Number one, how does the organization of the system change over time? And what conditions allow it to move forward? Excuse me, to move toward more functional patterns. So the PFS framework in humans.
I think the PSF framework doesn't answer those questions for humans, but it offers a systemic lens that could help explore them.
So it's more work for people working with humans to
Yeah, of
pursue.
course.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so how has shifting from a machine-based model to biotensegrity helped you understand what's going on with these horses?
The shift to a biotensegral perspective changes the way I thought about a body and its capacities quite fundamentally.
Mm,
And in a machine model, you fix parts, and in a biotensegral system, you have to change the organization of the whole.
yeah.
And I think that's a great difference. And this makes timing and load distribution extremely important.
Mhm.
Um, for example, when you look at stance phase timing, it becomes easier to understand why tendon injuries are so common in horses and why certain ideas about hoof trimming developed the way they did. And from the perspective of the PSF framework, an interesting issue appears. Much of the available data on equine locomotion is based on movement patterns that may already be maladaptive. And in other words, pathological patterns may end up defining what we consider normal.
Mm.
Mm. So shifting to a biotensegral view doesn't just change how we interpret problems, it also changes how we interpret the data we build our models on.
Yeah, so that's big. That's very big.
Yeah.
So how has this new framework influenced your approach to treatment?
And what I said before has, of course, practical consequences. And I accept the horse's body being a highly complex system. I'm probably not able to correct in detail. And I accept that it is sort of a black box, as Leonid once explained it. And I may, sorry, I may influence the input according to the output I'd like to get. That's what I can do. And so instead of trying to fix isolated symptoms, the focus becomes creating conditions that allow the system to reorganize toward more functional patterns.
Mm-hmm. And again, the same is true with people, with
I think so.
humans. Yeah. Okay, so I know you don't often come to our Trailblazers meetings on Zoom, but we do love it when you do. And you've been a member of Biotensegrity Trailblazers pretty much from the beginning.
Yeah.
What have you gotten from being a member?
I think in the very beginning, I really liked that idea behind your Biotensegrity Trailblazers. And it actually inspired me to build something similar for the German speaking community.
Mhm.
Um, and at the moment, we have the Biotensegrity Pioneers, and evolving from these online courses, there is a group of Biotensegrity visionaries that is now working quite actively
Mhm.
together. And
Congratulations. That's
that's,
very
yes, it
exciting.
was a long way.
Ah. That's great. Super
Yeah.
exciting. So, if there's somebody watching this interview with you and they work with horses, or maybe even just working with human bodies in general, what is one thing from the framework that they could start observing or thinking about differently? If you could give people one tip, what would it be?
Oh, one important shift to move away from the idea that we need to tell the body how to organize itself. If the body is a biotensecral system, it already has powerful mechanisms for self-organization. What we can influence are the conditions under which that organization happens. So instead of trying to manually correct posture or movement, the more interesting question becomes, what action can we invite that allows the system to reorganize itself through interaction with the environment and the rider or its own movement? In other words, the goal is not to instruct the body how it should be organized, but to invite it to do something that allows a more functional organization to emerge.
Yeah, thanks, Maren. That is a big shift from the conventional way of thinking, but
Yeah.
boy, it makes a difference. Not just in how we feel in our bodies, but I see it makes a difference in how people start to relate in so many different facets of their life.
I think where you can see what difference such an approach makes is the supplementary material of the paper. It is
Mm,
already online. You can see that. And there are 10 case studies with
great.
horses who did the shift from PSF minus, so the
Uh, yeah,
maladaptive cycle, to PSF plus, the
10 case
positive.
studies. That's great. And I'll
Yeah.
get you to send me the link for that and I'll post it with this video, okay?
Mhm.
Okay, so we are featuring this paper in our upcoming book club. And I'm wondering, what do you hope people are going to dig into or debate when we get together on the first Wednesday of April to discuss this work?
Okay. What I think I would really like, it's a little bit difficult because I would like you to look at how strongly our interpretation of data depends on the conceptual framework we use. And
Mhm.
many of the observations we discuss in the paper come from studies that are already well known. And what differs is often not the data themselves, but the conclusions that are drawn from them. So an interesting question for discussion would be, what happens if we look at the same data through different structural models? For example, through a traditional liver-based biomechanical model versus a biotensegral perspective. And when you do that, you sometimes arrive at very different interpretations. And that doesn't mean that the data are wrong. It means that context matters.
Yeah. Nice.
And another aspect that was really important for us while writing the paper was the question of scientific connection. Our conclusions differ in several ways from common interpretations, but we still tried to keep the work connected to the existing body of research. And for me, that balance is actually one of the most interesting challenges, how to stay scientifically connected while not losing the integrity of your own observations and conclusions. And I think that tension is something worth discussing.
Yeah, it's going to be a very rich discussion when we meet for book club for sure. And one that merits discussion, not just in book club, but ongoing discussion. It's so important.
Yeah.
Thank you for bringing it to us. Okay, so one last question, and that is, what is next for this work? Where do you want to take these ideas?
There will definitely be a follow-up paper. I've already started it. I started it
Good for
before the other one was
you.
uploaded. And the next step will be to look more closely at locomotion and some of the assumptions behind current biomechanical interpretations. But before that, I may need to get my life a little bit back in order before starting the next text writing marathon.
Well, thank you for sticking with it and getting this work done and for continuing with your vision. And thank you for coming and sharing with us today.
Thanks for your invitation, and I'm looking forward to the book club.